My stepmother hates me and wants to kick me out of the house. How can I tell my dad about this? Hey, this might be a long one. I'm sorry in advance. There's a TLDR at the bottom for those who don't want to read everything. Honestly, I really don't know what to do about my situation. I don't have anyone close to talk to or get advice from, so I thought I might ask here for some help. I have an amazing dad. He raised me after my mom passed away when I was only 5 years old. He's been my friend, my supporter, and someone I look up to. I want to be like him when I grow up. He's done everything for me, and we've always had a good relationship. When my dad first introduced my stepmother to me, I was 10 years old. She was so nice to me at first. My dad was so happy that we got along, and he hoped we would build a good relationship. They got married when I was 13, and I was really excited. I thought this would mean that me and my dad would have a new family member, and everything would be great. I believed that things were fine between me and my stepmother until just a few months after their honeymoon. One morning, my stepmother told me something that shook me to my core. She said we just needed to pretend to like each other around my dad, but when he wasn't home, I shouldn't bother her. Honestly, it shattered me, but I agreed because I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know how to handle it or what I was supposed to say. From that point on, whenever it was just me and my stepmother, she would say things to get under my skin. She'd comment on my height, my weight, and once even said I was a funny-looking version of my dad. I hoped my dad would notice, but he didn't. He actually thought my stepmother and I were so close that she understood me. He thought she was like a second mother to me. Every time he saw us together, he looked so happy. I thought maybe it was worth just keeping quiet and giving it time for things to improve, but it only got worse. This year, my stepmother started picking on me even when my dad was around, and to make matters worse, he either joined in or ignored it. I've told him that the things she says make me uncomfortable and hurt, but he brushes it off, saying she's just teasing me and that it doesn't mean anything. Right now, I've reached my breaking point. I feel scared, angry, and frustrated at both my stepmother and my dad. Dad was away for work, and it was just me and my stepmother at home. She threw a party with some of her friends. I helped set up the house and cook dinner because my dad asked me to. I didn't mind helping out. After they ate and were hanging out, I was in my room when I overheard their conversation. They were sitting on the porch, talking loudly, and I could hear everything. SM's friends were talking about how lucky she was to have a nice husband and a house, and they mentioned how nice it was that I cooked for them. SM said, "I hate living with her. She's annoying and weird. I can't wait till she's 18 so I can kick her out of here." I was in shock. I never thought she hated me that much. But why? I had no idea. I thought we were just tolerating each other. But to hear that she hated me, it was just too much to handle. I couldn't figure out what I had done wrong. I've been really down since that day 2 weeks ago now. I thought I had passed the initial shock, but then, today, at rugby training, I broke down in tears. My coach sent me home because I couldn't hold it in anymore. I drove to the beach, hoping to calm down. I don't even know what I was feeling. I just felt like everything was too much to carry. Eventually, I fell asleep in my car, but now I'm here, hoping someone will give me advice on how to talk to my dad about what's happening. I'm so scared of his reaction. I don't want to make him sad because he's done so much for me, but I'm not strong like him, and I'm really struggling. My question is, how do I approach this conversation with my dad? Should I even tell him about my stepmother's hate for me, or should I keep quiet and try to live with it? After I wrote the first part, I got so much support from all of you, and I really appreciate it. It's comforting to know that there are people who understand and care. After everything that's happened, I'm still feeling lost, but I also know I need to take control of my life. I've decided to talk to my dad, but I'm still terrified. I don't know what the outcome will be, and it's scary to think about it. The day after I drove to the beach, I decided that I couldn't keep this inside anymore. I spent the whole day thinking about it, and when my dad came home the next evening, I knew it was time to speak up. He came in, all tired from work, and smiled when he saw me. It broke my heart because I wanted to be strong for him, but I was falling apart inside. I tried to act normal, but I couldn't. I sat down with him and just said it, "Dad, I overheard something that really hurt me. I need to tell you something about your wife." His face changed immediately. He looked at me, confused, but there was a part of him that seemed to know something was wrong. I hesitated, taking a deep breath before I told him everything. I explained what I had overheard, how my stepmother told her friends she hated me, how she couldn't wait to kick me out. I tried to hold back the tears, but they came anyway. I told him I didn't understand why she hated me so much, and I felt trapped. I told him how it had been for so long now, how she had made my life miserable, and how I didn't feel like I could talk to him about it. My dad listened quietly. At first, he didn't say anything, and it made me feel like I was talking to a stranger. I kept waiting for him to tell me everything would be okay, that he would make things right. But instead, he looked down at his hands, and I could see the pain in his eyes. It was like I had just shattered everything he thought was perfect. Then, after what felt like forever, he spoke. I had no idea. He said quietly, "I thought everything was fine between you two. She always told me you were close. I never knew it was this bad." His voice cracked as he continued, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Hearing him say that, it hurt even more. He didn't know. He had no clue what I had been going through. And now I had to figure out how to make him understand. "I don't know what to do," he said, his eyes brimming with tears. "I love both of you, but I don't know how to fix this." That was when I felt the weight of everything on me. I wasn't just telling him about the hatred his wife had for me. I was telling him that I didn't know if I could live with her anymore. I wasn't sure if I could stay in this house. I felt like a stranger in my own home. I looked at my dad, trying to find the right words, but I couldn't. I had so much to say, but it felt like my throat was closing up. I needed him to understand, but at the same time, I didn't want to hurt him more. "I don't want you to choose between us," I said, my voice trembling, "but I can't live like this anymore. I don't trust her, and I don't feel safe here. I'm scared, and I don't know what to do." My dad just sat there, his face pale, looking completely lost. "I don't want you to feel this way," he said. "I never wanted this for you, but I don't know how to fix it. I don't know if I can." I felt my heart break. I didn't want to make him feel like this, but I also knew I couldn't keep living this way. We talked for a long time, but it didn't feel like we were getting anywhere. He kept apologizing, and I kept trying to explain, but it was clear that this was bigger than either of us. I finally told him that I couldn't live with her anymore. I wasn't sure what would happen, but I knew I couldn't stay in this house with her. I told him I was planning to stay with my rugby coach for a while, and that I needed time to figure things out. My dad didn't argue. He just nodded, but I could tell he was struggling with the idea. It broke my heart to see him so torn. I didn't want to hurt him, but I also couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay. The next day, my dad asked me to go with him to see a counselor. He said he wanted to fix things, but I wasn't sure it would work. I agreed, but I knew it wouldn't be easy. I ended up staying with my rugby coach for a while, and that's when things really started to change for me. My coach has been amazing. He's always there for me, and he never judges me. He's like a second father to me, and I'm so grateful for him. He's been helping me work through everything, and it's been a relief to have someone who actually listens and cares. But even with all the support, I'm still struggling. I feel like I'm caught in the middle of everything, and I don't know how to move forward. I don't know if my dad will choose me or his wife. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I can't keep living like this. A few days after I spoke to my dad, I couldn't shake the feeling of being lost. I'd finally said everything I needed to say, but I didn't feel any better. If anything, it made me feel more isolated. I stayed with my coach, but the weight of everything still hung over me. I kept thinking about my dad and how broken he seemed, how he was stuck between me and my stepmother. It's not like I wanted to tear their relationship apart, but I knew something had to change. While staying at my coach's house, I began to realize that I needed to focus on myself for a while. My coach had been a rock for me, and I couldn't thank him enough for giving me a safe place to stay. He had rules in place, but I respected him enough to follow them. He treated me like I mattered, like I was worth something. His wife was kind too, but I still felt anxious when I was around her. It wasn't because she did anything wrong. It was just that I wasn't used to having people in my life who actually cared for me. After everything with my dad, I knew it wasn't just my stepmother that I was running from. I was running from my own fears. I was scared of losing the only family I had left. I didn't know what my dad was going to decide to do about my stepmother, but I was sure that I couldn't be the one to force him to make a choice between us. I didn't want that, but I also didn't want to live in constant fear of what she might say or do next. My dad texted me a few days after our conversation, asking if I wanted to meet up. It was clear he wanted to talk more, but I wasn't sure I was ready for another emotional conversation. It felt like every time we spoke, things just got worse. Still, I knew we had to keep talking, because if we didn't, things would just fester and get even more painful. So, I agreed to meet him, but I was nervous, terrified about how it would go. The day we met up, we decided to go to the beach. It was supposed to be a peaceful, neutral place to talk. I was hoping for a calm conversation. But when I saw him walking toward me, I could see the exhaustion in his face. He looked tired, like he hadn't been sleeping, and it made me feel guilty. I didn't want to hurt him, but I couldn't pretend anymore that everything was fine. We walked along the shore for a while, neither of us speaking. I could hear the sound of the waves crashing against the sand, but it didn't feel soothing. I just felt empty. Finally, my dad broke the silence. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," he started, his voice soft but full of emotion. "I never realized how much you were hurting. I never saw how bad it was. I'm sorry." I wanted to tell him that it wasn't his fault, that I didn't blame him for not knowing, but the words got stuck in my throat. How could I make him understand that I didn't want him to feel guilty, that I didn't want to be the reason his marriage was falling apart? "I don't know how to fix this," he continued, looking out at the ocean. "I want to make things better for you, but I don't know how." The truth was, I didn't know how either. I was so tangled up in my own emotions that I couldn't see a way forward. I didn't know how to get my dad to understand how badly his wife had treated me. I didn't know how to make things right between us. "I just don't want to live with her anymore," I said, the words coming out in a rush. "I can't do it. I can't pretend anymore." My dad stopped walking, turning to face me. His expression was unreadable, and for a moment, I thought he might say something to make everything worse. But instead, he just nodded. "I understand," he said quietly. "I don't want you to feel like you have to stay in a situation that's hurting you. But I need you to know that this isn't easy for me either." I nodded, though I wasn't sure if I was understanding what he meant. It wasn't easy for him. I couldn't imagine the weight he was carrying, trying to balance his love for me with his commitment to his wife. I didn't want to make him choose, but I also didn't know how to keep living in this toxic environment. After a long silence, he spoke again. "I've been talking to your stepmother. We've had some tough conversations, and I'm not sure where we stand, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to help you." I didn't know what whatever it takes meant. Was he really going to make changes? Was he going to stand up for me? Or was this just another empty promise? "I don't trust her," I said, my voice shaking. "I don't feel safe living with her. I don't think I ever will." "I hear you," he said, his voice filled with regret. "But I don't want to lose you. I love you, and I want to figure this out. But I need time." "Okay," I nodded, but I wasn't sure I believed him. I didn't want to push him away, but at the same time, I couldn't keep living in the same house with her. I needed space. We talked for a little while longer, but I could feel the distance between us. It wasn't just the physical distance, it was the emotional distance. I was still scared, still angry, still hurt. I knew I couldn't fix everything overnight, but I also knew I couldn't keep living in this limbo, unsure of where I stood. As I drove back to my coach's house that day, I realized that I needed to focus on myself. I couldn't control what was happening with my dad and his wife, but I could control how I responded. I needed to take care of my mental health, to find my own peace, and to keep moving forward. The next few days were a blur. I had rugby training to focus on, and I started to feel like I could breathe again. But the emotional weight of everything still lingered. I wasn't sure what my dad would decide, and I wasn't sure what I was going to do next. But for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was in control of something. The days after our conversation at the beach were tough, but I started to realize something important. I couldn't control how my dad would handle his marriage, and I couldn't keep waiting for things to magically get better. I had to take charge of my own life. No matter how much I loved my dad, I couldn't keep sacrificing my peace and well-being for his happiness. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about my mental health and my future. A few weeks after that conversation, my dad reached out again. This time, it wasn't just a text asking to meet up. He called me, and when I picked up the phone, I could hear the tension in his voice. He sounded tired, like he'd been carrying something heavy for a long time. "I need to talk to you," he said. "Can we meet again?" I wasn't sure if I was ready to meet him again. I didn't want to go through the same emotional roller coaster, but I also knew that avoiding him wasn't the answer. So, I agreed to meet up. This time, though, I told myself that I wasn't going to let him avoid the tough conversation. I needed to hear that he would stand up for me, that he would prioritize my happiness, and that he understood the depth of what I'd been going through. We met at a small cafe near the beach, a place we used to visit together when things were good. The familiarity of it made my stomach twist. We sat down, and for a few moments, neither of us said anything. He looked at me like he was trying to find the right words, but he seemed unsure of where to start. "Listen," he began, finally breaking the silence. "I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened, and I need you to know something." I looked at him, my heart racing. I was afraid of what he was going to say, but I needed to hear it. "I don't want you to feel like you have to protect me anymore," he continued. "I know you've been trying to keep the peace for my sake, but that's not your job. I should have been the one protecting you all along. I've realized that now, and I'm sorry. I've been blind, and I haven't been there for you the way I should have." His words hit me like a ton of bricks. I hadn't expected this. I didn't know what to say. For so long, I'd been holding on to the hope that he would understand, that he would see things my way. But hearing him say it out loud, it felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders. "I want you to know that I'm working on things with your stepmother," he said, his voice steady but strained. "But I also want you to know that I'm not going to force you to live in a situation that makes you uncomfortable. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, and I'm willing to make changes." I nodded, trying to absorb everything he was saying. It was hard to believe that he was finally hearing me, that he was finally taking my side. But I wasn't sure how much I could trust that things would change. I had been hurt too many times, and I didn't want to let myself hope too much. "I don't want you to think that I'm just going to let this go," my dad continued. "I know I've made mistakes, and I know I've let you down, but I'm trying to fix it. I'm going to talk to your stepmother again. We're going to figure this out." I wanted to believe him. I really did. But deep down, I was still scared. Scared of being disappointed again. Scared of being let down. And scared of losing him. After we talked, I realized something. No matter what happened with my dad and stepmother, I had to keep moving forward. I couldn't wait around for them to fix things. I had to focus on my own life, my own happiness. I had my rugby, my coach, and a support system that actually cared about me. I couldn't lose sight of that. I still stayed at my coach's house for a while, and with each passing day, I felt like I was healing. It wasn't an easy road, but it was a road I was walking on my own terms. My coach's family became my family, and they made me feel safe. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I belonged. And then there was school. I threw myself into my studies. I realized that education was my way out, my way to a future where I could be independent and strong. I focused on getting the grades I needed to go to university, and slowly, I started to feel like I had a purpose again. The pain wasn't gone, but it was starting to dull. As the weeks passed, I still met up with my dad from time to time. It wasn't the same as before. There was a distance now, an emotional gap that I didn't know how to bridge, but at least we were talking. And at least he was trying. That was more than I could say a few months ago. One day, my dad sent me a message saying he wanted to talk again. I was nervous, but I agreed to meet him this time. It was different. When we sat down, he looked at me with a more determined look in his eyes. "I've made some decisions," he said. "I'm going to divorce your stepmother. I've realized that this isn't healthy for either of us, and I don't want you to keep living in this toxic environment. I've tried, but it's clear that things aren't going to change." I was stunned. I didn't expect this. I didn't know how to react. I had thought for so long that he would choose her over me. But here, he was, making the decision to choose me. "I'm sorry for everything that's happened," he said, "and I hope you can forgive me for not seeing it sooner. I love you, and I always will." I didn't know what to say. I wanted to cry, but I held it together. I didn't want to show him how much his words meant to me. I didn't want to show him how much I had been holding on to, the hope that he would finally stand up for me. "I'm glad you're doing this," I said, my voice shaky, "but it's not going to be easy." "I know," he replied, "but we'll get through it, together." And in that moment, I realized something. Things weren't perfect, and they probably never would be, but I wasn't alone anymore. I had my dad, my coach, and people who cared about me. That was all I needed. I still have a long way to go. There's a lot I still need to heal from, but I'm getting there. I've learned that sometimes the people we love don't always get it right, but they can still try to make it right. I've learned that it's okay to set boundaries, even with family. And I've learned that I don't have to sacrifice my happiness for anyone else.